When creating an application for either you or a client, you may need to use more than the language itself. Now, depending on the language will depend on if you need any of these specifics, or if you can get along without using some of these, depending on your use case, of course. Now, an example of this, of course, is in Python. You could create a system to send emails or a text message just using the libraries and import. However, in GDScript, we would have to come on here and use something like telesign here that we've got on screen, or Twilio, or SendGrid. You would need to use one of those kind of things to send a text message. Now, the problem with this comes from when you look at these APIs online, and you will never find a GDScript translation for you to use. The closest that you will find is Python. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at one of these. We're going to take a look at the Python code for it, and we're going to translate that over so you can then come over here to something like Rapid API or anywhere else, find an API you want to use, and learn how to use that inside of your own projects. So for this, you can see there's plenty of different categories that you can go through on here. There's tons of different APIs. They're all public. Some of them you have to pay for. Some of them are completely free, just putting hard limits on them. And then there are others that are somewhere in between. So if we take a look at this recipe app here, or this recipe API, you can see they have a free term or a free plan, as well as paid plans. However, you see you pay X amount for each additional, request or result or whatever it is that they're having, their setup is. And because of that, if you go to subscribe to it, you will need to put in your information. Now, on the flip side, there are some like this that have a hard limit, which will be 100% free. You just hit the subscribe button and you don't have to put any information in. So, of course, you're going to need an account to use. And I'm going to use this one as an example, the Recipe Search and Diet API. So go ahead and create an account, come over here and hit subscribe. And now for our endpoints here, you can see we drop down and we have lots of different options here. None of them are GDScript, and it's going to be like a 99% chance, at least for now. Maybe in the future that'll change, but there will not be any GDScript option for pretty well any API that you look at. But what we can do is use Python, because that is the closest for us, and use that to make a translation. So here I'm going to go to an HTTP client, and we can take a look at this information, as well as how it's structured in the Python request setup. Now, depending on the API, one may be better than another, or be a little clearer than another, whatever. That doesn't matter. But between those two, the HTTP connect and the request, between those two, you should be able to get a translation. So now over here, I just have a scene open. That's just control with an HTTP request with a signal connected to it. So what are we going to need here for Python? We're going to need this URL here, including the HTTPS. So we're going to need that variable. So we do var. In Python, you don't need this. So this will give us our URL. We're going to need our headers. So you can put that. Now our headers has to be an array. And not just an array, but a pool string array. So we can go ahead and change our curly braces into square brackets to make it an array. And then remove out the middle two quotes and replace them. That way each of these are one single string. And of course, we got to put var at the beginning. Here we go. So now we have our headers as a pool string array. We have our URL as a normal string. And next, you're going to need a query to go along with this. Now, taking a look at it with this, as you see using requests, this is not going to work for us. But if we come down here to HTTP client, we see something better. We will see this piece right here. Right after the get or post, the second argument of the request. And for the most part, we can just come up here and add it to the end of our URL. Like so, there we go. And I'll just remove chicken out of there because that's going to be our query. So create a new variable for our query. There we go. And we can put chicken in there. You can put anything else. You can do pastas. You can do breads. I don't know. Anything you want to put in there. Now, obviously, you'd want the user to be able to put whatever they want in here and do that later. Now, since we only have one query parameter, this is perfectly fine. But otherwise, if we have a situation where we have a bunch, what we could do is just go like this and use the %s to just put our placeholder in there and replace them later on with all of our query options that the user puts in. But since we just have one, this is fine. So to do this, we need to do an HTTP request, call the request function. And our first argument is going to be the URL. And we need to add in our query as well. Second argument, we need to pass in our headers. Now, depending on what your API is, you may be using or performing a post or a get. And if we just take a look here, we see in green, this is a get. So we don't need to do anything because get is the default for the request function here. But if you do need to make a post, then we can just pass in true here because this is HTTPS. And you would just come down here and select the post method. Now, for us, since we're using get, it would look like this. But get is the default, as is true here. So since we don't need those, we can just get rid of those. Assuming that you are using a get situation. Now, when our request completes, we're going to need to parse the data that comes back. As we see the example response, we are getting, or we will get a JSON. So I'll test the endpoint here. And we see all of our information here. And we can see, for example, we're going to want to get hits. In order to get all of our information, to get all of our actual results. So we'll keep that in mind. So first up, let's create our own variable. I'll call it response equals, and this will be parse JSON, and inside we'll do body.get underscore text underscore from underscore UTF-8. Open and close our parentheses. And we should now be able to print our response. So if all goes well, we should see in our output the response that we get back. Oh, right, I typed text again. It's get string from UTF-8. My mistake. And there we go. We have all of our information. Now all you have to do is just sift through all of this to find out what you're looking for. And if we were to use this information here that we used before, we see inside of hits is where all of our stuff is. So let's come over and do .hits and see what we get. Okay, let's go for item 0, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 0 is the name of it, so we would be going for yes, because this is inside of an array. Okay, and we have the information for the first item. So let's continue on in. And this is a dictionary. So we can ask for the recipe. And as you see, we're slowly just narrowing this down to find out the information that we're looking for. So instead of wasting time and jumping through all of this, we can just stop and take a look. If we want the cuisine type, for example, we can just go like this. since this is, again, another dictionary. And there we go. We can tell our user that the first result here is of Italian cuisine. So we can use something like this to, of course, get whatever information it is that we need. And we learned how to do that just by using Python requests and taking a look at that. Of course, our query doesn't make sense for us in GDScript. So we used Python HTTP client for that. Added the piece that we need just onto our URL and pulled out our query to just add in later. And passed in our headers. So hopefully that makes sense as what to do. So you can translate Python information over into GDScript so that you're able to use these APIs to get all kinds of different information, whether that's for recipes, weathers, sending text messages, sending emails, statistics in games or sports, anime, whatever it is you want to look for. But that'll do it for this. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you have any recommendations or something that you want to see or have help with, leave them down below. And we'll see, maybe we'll get to them in the next video.